ladies and gentlemen, it really is a great pleasure to welcome you all to this very important seminar on financing water resilience. Everything starts with water. Water is the foundation of life, a vital resource that sustains our environment, our economy, and our society. It is essential to our well-being, our public health, our agriculture, our industries, and our energy supply. Water should truly be the center of our strategic considerations as we work to build a sustainable, secure, and competitive Europe. I will not stay with neither security nor health for now, but both issues deserve our attention. My name is Stine Bosse. I belong to the Renew Group in the European Parliament. Water is and remains a central priority of my work in the ENVI Committee. We know Europe's waters are under severe pressure in terms of quality and quantity. Water stress currently affects 30% of Europe's population each year, while only 37% of Europe's surface water bodies achieve good or high ecological status. The challenges to water security are significant, and if left unaddressed, will have far-reaching consequences. The need to ensure water resilience, the capacity to anticipate, prepare, and adapt to changing water conditions have never been more urgent. That is why I strongly support the European Commission's work to put forward a new water resilience strategy to ensure proper management of our water resources and address scarcity. This is a crucial step in the right direction. We in the European Parliament have also been actively engaged in this process. Just yesterday, the ENVI Committee adopted an own initiative report which provides valuable input to the European Commission's strategy, highlighting, among others, sectorial targets for water efficiency, 2, the need for strategic investments in innovative solutions for water treatment and management. This has, apart from strengthening the competitive and innovative edge of our industry, huge potentials in sustainability and efficiency, in protecting our ecosystems and human health, as well as for preparedness. On funding, as is the topic today, I'm happy to report calls for 1, a separate fund to dedicate to water resilience within the upcoming MFF, 2, stronger collaborations with the EIB, and 3, for importance of public-private partnerships as a secure funding secure funding for water investments. I'm also glad my colleague Thomas Bayada, who led this file, will actually join us later to share more perspectives on this work. The water resilience strategy is critical, not only to ensure continued access to essential water services and mitigate the effects of extreme weather events, it also is essential for the competitiveness of our continent. Many of the industries that are key to our economic future require extensive quantities of water. This means we need to step up our efforts on efficiency in water use across all sectors, and I'm glad to welcome today on this panel a representative from Grundfos, a company from my home country, Denmark, a leading actor in innovative solutions to increase our collective efficiency. Efficiency goes a long way, but we also need to invest in infrastructures, both traditional and green, to increase our resilience against climate change and ensure economic development. We know that the investment gap in water is really significant. We actually have today with us one of the authors of the OECD report who first quantified this gap. But that important study did not fully consider the increasing impact of climate change. The question is therefore, where should the money to finance these growing investment needs come from? This is what we'll try to explore in this seminar. It is clear that the financing model of the water sector could and should evolve. We will listen to ideas from water operators, water regulators, and the OECD on how this could happen. We need the European Union to strengthen resilience across Europe as a condition for the prosperity and cohesion of our continent. That is why I'm pleased that the European Commission accepted our invitation to inform us about its future plans, and I'm also looking forward to hearing in detail what the European Investment Bank can do to support investments even more than what is already happening. We already know that EIB will be mandated to lend more money to the water sector and to develop new ad hoc instruments to support resilience investments. For example, they are considering teaming up with the insurance sector for specific insuring instruments. There are many challenges ahead, but also potential solutions. And let me add that addressing these challenges can also strengthen our water industry which is really already happening globally. I'm delighted to organize this seminar in partnership with Aqua Public Europe. This event brings together the best experts from international and EU institutions, water operators, regulators, and businesses to explore innovative approaches to bridge and finance the finance gap for the water sector. This is a crucial step to build a water resilient Europe that is prepared for the challenges of tomorrow. Now I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Fianzconaro, and you are the Executive Director of Aqua Public Europea. Thank you very much.
Thank you to you. Thank you to you, MEP Bosse, for introducing indeed the scope of this seminar. Above all, thank you for accepting the proposal of co-organizing this seminar that is, of course, very timely. You reminded why. We had the votes in the EBIN committee yesterday on the report. We will expect soon the publication by the Commission of the resilience strategy, but I would add that it's a timely seminar for the challenges that MEP Bosse, for the magnitude of the challenges that MEP Bosse reminded. And also, we hope that today we are just starting a work, at least from our organization, but also a dialogue with stakeholders and institutions on how indeed financing the important gap that we have in, for water, a dialogue that will continue also beyond this, beyond Brussels, also national level, because some of the things that are discussed here today will need to be declined and implemented at local level, because water remains also a local dimension. So thanks a lot. Without further ado, I would like then to introduce and invite the first speaker to join me on stage, and we are grateful to Ms. Claudia Lazabal, Head of Unit for Sustainable Freshwater Management at DG Environment, for accepting indeed our invitation. We ask Ms. Lazabal to tell us a bit more what the Commission is cooking in its kitchen on water resilience. We know that the recipe is still secret, but maybe she can anticipate some ingredients of the strategy. And also, we will ask Ms. Lazabal if she has time to stay a bit with us for a discussion, even beyond the water resilience, about more generally how the financing model of the water sector can evolve to address the new challenge. Thanks a lot, Ms. Lazabal.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to first thank very much Mr. Bosse for hosting this very important event together with Aqua Publica. This shows once again the very strong commitment of the European Parliament on the topic that has been for years. It has been recurrently discussed in plenary, and it shows that across parties, water resilience and in general water management is a topic of interest. And I would not dwell on the importance of water and the importance and urgency of achieving resilience because Ms. Stine has already done it very eloquently. I would rather focus on the part on financing. So indeed, the Commission and President von der Leyen has made out of the water resilience strategy a big priority in her mandate, and actually has even renamed the portfolio of the environmental commissioner and has put water resilience as part of it to really show the importance of this, and actually wants to make this a corporate policy. So not only of DG Environment, but also that across the other policy sectors, that they take this as a priority, given indeed the importance of water for many other sectors and users. In her political guidelines and in the mission letters that she did for different commissioners and vice presidents, she spread water resilience in several of them, giving them a role and giving them an accountability to also deliver on water resilience. It's clear that although indeed I will not be able to tell you everything that we are thinking of, and you will have to wait, the suspense will still linger until June, when we will most probably adopt the strategy. We are now in deliberations, internal deliberations, but what is clear from what she has already said is that there will be a big component of investments, and this is meant to be a very big assistance agenda, assisting member states at all different levels to achieve water resilience, because it's clear that water management percolates to all the levels of competent authorities. So in this assistance agenda, the issue of funding has become a very prominent discussion with stakeholders, with the member states. It has already been for years. It's not the water resilience that has been brought investments and financing in water. It was already there when we discussed the implementation of the existing water acquis. So this is an old topic that we are trying to now approach from a different angle. So when we discuss about financing, we see in all the river basin management plans, which we have recently adopted, all member states say that lack of funding is one of the barriers to achieve the environmental goals. All of them say that. When we talk about stakeholders, they all say there's a lack of money. We have several estimates, and we are now working with EIB ourselves with a new study for putting a price tag on the investment needs. We have different figures that are around the table, all very high. So it's clear that the investment gap is very big. So we should say, is that an issue of pouring more money? Partly yes, undoubtedly partly yes, but it's not only. Because what we see also, and when we discuss with our colleagues in agriculture under the CAP, or we discuss with our colleagues of regional funds, they say there is money there that is not used. There's a lot of money that is not used. There's a lot of money that has been allocated to water, and at the end of the day, it's not used for water. And since the date for using the money is approaching, and they haven't used it for water, then they deviate it for something else so that they will not lose the money. So there's an issue of uptake of that money, uptake of existing funds. And so we dig that into what are the reasons for the lack of uptake. Absorption capacity comes all the time because we are talking about a huge machinery. Water management is a massive machinery, and a large part of this machinery works at very local level. So the absorption capacity of municipalities or integrated municipalities is sometimes hampered. And so the difficulty is, can they absorb and do all the necessary procedures of public procurement and all these things to spend the money? So there's an issue of absorption capacity. There's an issue of planning also. Do they have the right planning? Have they prioritized among all the needs? What are the needs that they have to cater now for? Then what are the needs for next 5 years? What are the needs for next 5 years? We see in the river basin management plan that although the law asks for it, we rarely see long-term financial planning. So there's an issue of planning also. And for that reason, we have as an ex-ante conditionality for regional funds that member states who want to use money for water, they have to have a priority action plan for a prioritization of funding for drinking water and urban wastewater treatment. So we ask, you need to plan so that you don't spend the money in a completely fragmented way. You have a plan and you're going to spend that money. The other difficulty that we have is that what we need for water is big investments and little investments. So yes, a wastewater treatment plant can absorb hundreds of millions in one go. It's very attractive because in one go, you have spent a lot of money on something that is really needed and actually most of the time obligatory to do. But what we need is also little projects, nature-based solutions, little projects of restoration, so atomized projects, which are equally important, but take more time, take more procedures. So if I have to choose between spending in one go 125 million or spending 25 times 5 million, and the clock is ticking and the Commission is telling me, spend the money, you see what the decision will be. So there is this issue of we need big projects and we need little projects, and how we can accompany also the little projects, which are equally important. These myriad of little projects that are needed. When we discuss, and we were discussing with the EIB, what are the different types of investment needs that we need? We have, in a very schematic way, separate them in 3 parts. We have what we call, in that internal jargon, so forgive me for that, machinery cost, which is the cost of running the machine. Is what the authorities pay for monitoring the water, for checking inspections, for doing the permits, checking the abstractions are right, paying the guys who are going to go and measure the water here and there. So it's running the show. So these are a hidden part, but it's a very important part because it's basically all the authorities paying for running the machinery of control, implementation, enforcement, and monitoring of the quality and the state of the waters. Then we have the other part, which is actions to remediate or prevent. So that's doing infrastructure, doing remediation operations, restoration of ecosystems, is a physical intervention to change things, and that can absorb a lot of money. So that's acting response cost. You see a problem, and I'm going to remediate, I'm going to put an infrastructure of supply, whatever. And that also, there you start having less only the administration and also the private sector. For the machinery cost is mostly administrations paying for the machinery cost. The middle column is shared. And the third column is the investment needed by the users of water. That can be farmers, industries, tourism, you name it, to reduce their impact on waters, to abate pollution. So farmers doing things to abate pollution, become more water efficient. So is the private sector investing to reduce their water impacts? And those are equally needed because the users need to step in and invest in reducing their impact on water. So there we see that mostly is, of course, the private sector, but with some help, of course, of subsidies for farmers, subsidies for water efficiency, water reuse, etc. So, but having these 3 classification allows us to see which are the actors that can come in to help. Because what is clear is that even increasing absorption capacity and even increasing the funds, we will need private investors to come in. And in the private investors, what we have seen is and you are coming from the sectors you are coming, you know this very well. There are three reasons why the private sectors would get into this. One is because there's a profit to be made. And for that, they don't really need our help, you would say. But sometimes they don't know that there's a profit to be made. We have to show them that there is a profit to be made. So there is with a torch, we would show the private investors, here there's a profit for you to be made. And it's not being tapped and nobody's getting that profit. So first is showing the profit opportunities. So what we'll get, they will get into this if there's a profit to be made. The other reason they will get into this is because their vulnerability to environmental degradation or to water stress is so high, they cannot afford not getting into this. Because they're going to be the victims, or their economic operator, or their economic activities, or their profits are tied to a good water quality or a good status of water or environmental status. So they need to restore, help the problem to go away so their vulnerability is reduced. And so we need that, what we need to do, show them their vulnerability. We need to show them that they are vulnerable. Otherwise, they will not see the need to restore the environmental degradation. They need to see their operations are vulnerable to this and their profits are tied to it. And the third category is where there is a reputational gain to be had. It's not about money. It's not because I'm going to be the victim of this. It's because there is a reputational gain for me to get into this. Either for corporate sustainability matters, because my image will be better, because I will be able to recruit better people that want, young people that want to have a purpose in life beyond making a good salary, you name it, is a reputational gain. So that we also need to work on the reputational gains. And the last thing that we're also going to be working on is this issue of bringing together problem holders, for which there are many. So we are not in want of problem holders in town. So we have many of problem holders. We have solution providers. Those are a bit rarer, but there are many. And some we don't know. So we need to find them out, the solution providers. And then for that, there is a huge push for innovation in the strategy. So multiply the solution providers and the investors, the ones who are going to see a profit in this, or a reputational gain, or a vulnerability reduction, and they're going to get into this, okay? And we need to bring this together. What we see also is, and that was for the colleagues which are of RTD who are in the room today, who organized a very interesting meeting with some big investors, French investors, who were saying, we have a lot of money. Water is the new thing. We realize there's money to be done here, as it was for energy 10 years ago. Now it's water. But the problem, we don't find where to put this money, which was very paradoxical, because we only hear about there's not enough money. We hear this 10 times a day. And this guy said, we have plenty of money in our pockets and we don't know where to put it. So we said we need to do a matchmaking here, because what we see is a lot of problem holders. So there's a very big need of cocooning this matchmaking so that at the end we have the results and the resilience we want by this tripartite cooperation. So those are basically in terms of financing, and I'm being very general because there's no time and I want to keep the suspense. But those are the areas where we want to fund. And I will say two more other things, and then I will finish. One is not only about putting money and helping people to spend that money, is also about taking away subsidies that make matters worse. Because if we're also pouring money on making matters worse, we will never get there. So this issue of environmental harmful subsidies is of course a crucial issue. And the last one, there is the new MFF coming, and we will not be able to say anything. That I can tell you. The suspense should not be there. We will not be able to say anything about the budget in the water resilience because the budget discussions will come later. So we will not be able to prejudge the discussions on the budget. But what we can say is no matter what the budget of the future will be, we have a running budget and we need to use it to the max. And for that, I will just mention that on the 1st of April, in the context of the midterm review of the regional funds, we have catered for exceptional conditions for water resilience. So water resilience has become one of the priorities on which we are saying to member states, halfway through the program, if you have money around, put it into water, also into affordable housing, etc. So it's not the only priority, water resilience. And we are giving 100% co-funding. So basically, we will be paying for the whole thing. So this shows the importance and the priority that the Commission is giving to this. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks to you, Claudia Zabal, for not only telling but ingredients, but indeed sharing with us today what is the conceptual framework the Commission is working on. I think for us it's really, really important. Some promising news. We shared with members yesterday the news about the midterm review of the current MFF, and that's the priority. Water is one of the 5 priorities indeed. I'm sure that many of the things that you said will be echoed by the panelists that I will now invite on stage. I know that there are questions from the audience. Please hold on. There will be time. I will try my best as a moderator to ensure some time for question and answer at the end before the end of the meeting. Just say that as water operators, we are problem owners probably, but let me say we consider ourselves also solution providers. Without further ado, I would like to invite then the panelists for the ensuing discussion. Bernard Van Nuffel, the President of Aqua Public Europea, Professor Vera Ero, President of the European Association of Water Regulator, Xavier Lefleve, Senior Advisor at USCD, Bonali da Costa, Head of EU Affairs at Grundfos, and James Hunt, Senior Engineer at EIB. Thank you for accepting our invitation, especially those traveling to Brussels today, and thank you for joining me on stage. And we have indeed a full stage. So if you are all settled down, okay, I think we can start the panel discussion. I will start with the President of Aqua Public Europea, my President indeed, Bernard Van Nuffel. So Bernard, water operators have key responsibility in ensuring reliable services 24 hours a day, high quality water services every minute, but increasingly water utilities are also asked to take on new responsibilities. Some of the small projects Mr. Lazabal was mentioning, from river restoration to sponge city, to nature-based solutions, and also water operators, although not maybe the main responsibility, but they are confronted with the necessity to ensure an equitable and affordable access to water. So the question for you is, if you find that the current prevailing financing model for the water sector is adequate to meet these challenges and indeed to reconcile the 3 elements that we mentioned in the title, that is efficiency, sustainability, and equity. Bernard, by the way, I will be ruthless with timekeeping because we are already running a bit late. Indeed, we like to keep the time a bit for discussion. Thank you.
How much minutes do I have,
Less than you think.
Less than I think. Okay.
7, 8 minutes max.
Okay. Thank you, MEP Stine Bosse, for hosting this event with Aqua Public Europea, and thank you for your strong support to the new water resilience strategy. I would like first to stay as a local elected and board member of a public water operator. We have this particular role to ensure the right to water and sanitation service for our citizens, and this is not very well known. So this is a big responsibility for the local elected in the water sector. In 2020, you told us about this, Stine Bosse. The OECD estimated that an additional 250 billion euro in investments would be needed in the water sector over the next decade to ensure compliance with existing legislation and improve efficiency. Today, we can confidently say that this gap has only grown larger, and not just because of the high inflation we have faced in recent years. 4 key factors have contributed to widening this investment gap. First, key water directives, such as the recast Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, has been revised and impose now more stringent requirements and set new objectives, which require fresh investments. Second, the security context requires new measures to protect our water infrastructure from malicious attacks. Third, the water demand is expected to grow, driven by economic and industrial developments, particularly in sectors key to the green and digital transition. And as Mrs. Stine Bosse told us, the OECD study did not take into account the impact of climate change. Strengthening resilience against floods and droughts requires new investments, both in traditional grey solutions and in nature-based green solutions. The question now is, how do we secure additional resources while ensuring water affordability to guarantee the right to water to everyone? As I said, water operators have a great responsibility to increase efficiency and to carry out the right investments, which means maximizing benefits while minimizing long-term financial liabilities. Secondly, there is a crucial need for policies that can prevent additional cost increases. And I think in particular of pollution prevention. Water that remains clean doesn't require costly treatment. So we have to protect our catchment from further pollution. But that is unlikely to be enough. We also probably need to rethink the financial framework of water resources management, considering that water management no longer only means providing drinking water and sanitation services, but encompasses the whole water cycle. Aqua Public Europea will soon publish a paper outlining concrete proposals to address these challenges. I'd like to share with you, if I have some more time, I'd like to share with you today some key ideas from this paper. The follow-up discussion we'll have today will also feed into this work. First proposal, we need a smarter tariffing system. The fixed component of water bills should be increased, in particular for some categories of users. For example, users of seasonal consumption patterns, such as holiday homes and tourist businesses. I'd be very interested to hear the views of the President of the WAHEC on this in the follow-up discussion. Second, we need a better implementation of the polluter pays principle. It is not only a matter of fairness, but also crucial to ensure the proper functioning of the internal markets. And that is exactly why we need to apply the polluter pays principle at an European level. And third, we need to consider financing some interventions through ring-fenced taxes in particular interventions such as river restorations, sponge cities, wet areas that are key to restoring the broken water cycle and have at the same time a strong public good and multi-benefit dimension. These taxes or levies could be based on environmental factors such as the built-up area occupied by property owners or businesses. This would also foster better integration between water and land use planning. Successful examples already exist in Europe, such as the Dutch water system tax or the France's MEP, la gestion des milieux aquatiques, the managing of water areas and prevention of floods. We need the right financial partners, public banks, and in particular, the European Investment Bank play a critical role in the water sector. The EIB's long-term, low-cost financial products align perfectly with the nature of water infrastructure investments, which require long-term, low-risk financing. In addition, the EIB's expertise in the water sector provides invaluable technical support to water operators. And last but not least, we need to ensure economic solidarity between territories at a national level, but also at the European level, particularly for regions that are poorer both in revenues and in water availability. These regions need economic support to carry out much needed infrastructure investments and build up water resilience. This is necessary to prevent water scarcity from increasing economic disparities and to mitigate the risk of conflicts between countries over shared water resources. In short, ensuring economic solidarity for water management is an essential component of European cohesion. To sum up, the need for increased investments in the water sector is clear, but we must approach this challenge strategically by improving efficiency, better enforcing and upgrading our regulatory framework, and leveraging the right financial tools. I am quite positive that we can close this investment gap while maintaining water affordability for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernard Van Nuffelen, for outlining some proposals from Aqua Public Europea. I must admit that I didn't take note while you were speaking because I'm quite familiar with these ideas as well. I'd like to move on with the next panelist. Bonaldi da Costa, you are head of EU affairs for Grundfos. Bernard Van Nuffelen just mentioned the importance that efficiency has for water operators, and you represent a company that is a key player in European industrial landscape in providing innovative solutions for efficiency indeed. So my question to you is what key policy measures you think should the European Union prioritize or put into place to indeed enhance this search for efficiency, not only for the water sector, for water providers, but also for agriculture and industry? Bonaldi da Costa.
Thanks a million. I think you gave a better introduction of myself and my company than I could potentially do. So I suppose I'll skip that. But yeah, you know, it's great to be here, firstly. And I can only concur, certainly, with what's been said by both Bernard and Claudia in terms of the salience of bolstering our water resilience. I think increasing water scarcity, of course, poses a huge threat to the EU. And the need to invest in water resilience has perhaps never been clearer than it is right now. And I suppose from our perspective, when we unpack this, you know, there are three key reasons we would fall to, and certainly from an industrial development standpoint, being the first, a societal implications perspective, and also technological leadership. So industrially, today, industry accounts for 50% of the EU's total water abstraction. So, of course, heavily influencing both quality and quantity of our fresh water bodies. This demand will only grow in the years to come. We see the next sort of economic frontiers, the industries that are being prioritized and pushed as part of the industrial competitiveness, let's say gender push, be it data centers, AI, semiconductors, hydrogen. The commonality across all of these industries is that they are all incredibly water intensive, and they're also receiving quite heavy political backing for growth to happen in the years to come. If we do want to realize these ambitions, then of course we need to empower our industries to not only better optimize and manage their water consumption, but also reduce external dependencies on water. From a social perspective, and I'll approach this from a slightly different angle later on, hopefully I get a bit of time to do it. But, you know, there are huge societal implications to not investing in water resilience. I'll take my sort of honorary Dane Gunfast hat off for a second and put on my Irish national hat. And I can tell you anecdotally, in Ireland, we're currently facing a housing supply crunch, as are several other member states in the EU. Demand far outstrips the pipeline to meet it. And as a result, the Irish government has, over the next 5 years, come out with a tag which averages at around 50,000 new builds per annum. Now, Irish Water, the public water operator in Ireland, has said openly that they can only match 35,000 new homes per annum over this 5-year basis. Why? Because our infrastructure is, I'm going to be harsh here, quite destitute as a result of underinvestment, because our model effectively relies on government spending. So that isn't good. And I suppose kind of speaks to your point where we do need private investment and alternative investment. And then thirdly, technological leadership. You know, when it comes to innovation water technologies, the EU is #1 in the world. And I suppose at a time when we're looking for champions amidst international competition, this is something we should be proud of and something we should maintain, because if we are complacent, we'll find ourselves in a similar situation to where we were solar panel manufacturing into 2000s, when we were leaders on that front and we gave it up pretty quickly to China, you know, and I think we all regret it now. So it's a lesson that should be learned, and one that we should very much take into consideration. So we clearly need to find the money to bolster our water resilience. And from our perspective, we need to align public and private financing with a clear regulatory framework that helps us channel our investments where they're needed. Pricing here is critical. You know, you can discuss the pros and cons of public versus private, or matching them really until the cows come home. But if you haven't got an adequate water tariff, you will not be able to incentivize water efficiency investments in industry, the water, wastewater networks, buildings, whatever it might be. So we need to better capture the true value of water. And in Europe today, you know, many industrial actors are often paying below cost rates for water, which has quite a negative impact, let's say, for our water bodies. From a regulatory standpoint, once we have this pricing in place, having the regulatory certainty is key, naturally, to further channeling investments towards the areas where they're needed. So from a regulatory framework perspective, as we're saying, whether this is implementation of existing legislation or addressing gaps on a regulatory front, such as standards, let's say, for industrial water reuse, which again, I'll come to, it is absolutely pivotal. So keeping this in mind, I suppose I'll hone in on 2 areas from our perspective that we believe would benefit greatly from such an alignment. As I mentioned, in industry, there's huge potential to optimize water consumption. We released a study last year with Ramball, which showed that in light industries in particular, there's a savings potential between 50 to 75%, which at the upper end is the equivalent to 67 million the consumption of 67 million European households, if a decentralized water management approach is taken on board. So in other words, reducing, reusing and reclaiming water. It sounds like a great idea, I suppose. And then you'll probably ask, well, why is it not being done? Well, as I mentioned, a lack of standards for minimum water quality, requirements for reuse and reclaim water in specific applications and processes we have seen is a major barrier for companies to invest, while in sectors that do have some water quality requirements, they could perhaps be overly stringent. Let's take pharmaceutical, where in many cases it'll be drinking water quality perhaps needed for industrial cleaning. And that can be quite an impediment. And the lack of standards not only makes reuse a much riskier investment for industries to take up, as it creates fragmentation if we don't have anything on an EU-wide level, because a company in, let's say, Germany might face completely different conditions in Spain or the Netherlands. And this impacts the scalability of solutions which we have readily available. From a finance perspective, water technologies are still quite costly to run. I think we have to be clear about that. And today they have quite a low rate of return. But, you know, aside from what I mentioned in terms of standards, that also has to come down to, again, the low water tariffs that are currently there, which don't really incentivize or stimulate industry to invest. So we need perhaps a better adherence to Article 9 of the Water Framework Directive. I hope this time still allow me, Milo, to get one more point in. 1 minute left. Brilliant, brilliant. I got one more point, and I'd like to put on rainwater harvesting as well. So in terms of buildings, you know, we see a similar logic which prevails here as well. In countries where you see a strong take-up of rainwater harvesting, which supports community resilience, you know, there's a strong combination between pricing, the availability of financing, and also a regulatory framework. So if we take Germany, for example, where this is something that's been quite well developed over the years, from a regulatory standpoint, they have come to a point where rainwater has to be kept on site as much as possible. From then a pricing perspective, it actually is favorable for you to do as a citizen because of charges they have when it comes to drainage fees. Okay, and then it's also easy to do because property owners only need to notify water supply companies about the construction, but do not need authorization, rather. And then there's also availability of financing depending on which region you're in. And as a result, you see 75,000 rainwater harvesting systems going in every year, and two-thirds of the new builds also having it from a design phase. So I'll leave it there. I think there's a lot we can do, and a lot perhaps the Commission can do to incentivize. So thanks.
Thank you, Bonaldi Acosta, for bringing us the view of the industry, for reminding us how some challenges can be turned also in opportunity. You mentioned the importance of the regulatory framework, in particular also the European level, as a even playing field, and importance of tariff to driving investment. And I now turn to my right to Professor Vera Airó, who is the chairwoman of the Portuguese water regulator. He's also newly appointed president of the European Association of Water Regulators. So how can you explain indeed why a regulation is key to drive efficiency and also consequently investments in the water sector? But maybe can you also tell us a bit more what tools regulation can offer to drive investment in those areas that maybe are not strictly related to efficiency, but are key for water resilience? Some of the small investments that Ms. Lazarou was mentioning in terms of increasing water storage capacity or natural-based solutions, so that increase indeed our water resilience. Ms. Airó.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the invitation for being here, for Aqua Public Europea, and of course for the European Parliament and MEP Bosse for receiving us here. It is a pleasure for me as a regulator in Portugal and now the president of WAREG to be able to share some messages. I think that what Ms. Olazabal referred before, that sometimes we need to make the messages pretty much visible. So that people understand our role. So economic regulation needs to become more visible also, so that the sector understands the role of regulation and how we can help actually in this point where we are. There is indeed a scale of the investment gap in Europe. So there is a need for investment, but also there is a need for us to be sure that the investment is made so is effective on the one hand, and so that the investment is made for operational, in conditions of operational efficiency, in conditions of environmental sustainability, and at the end of the day, also protecting the consumer. And so this is where I think that the economic regulation can actually breach these different interests. It's not just about saying that we need investment, we need the right investment so that it makes our sector more resilient and more efficient. We need the investment to be made, we need the investment to be paid, and therefore we need also consumers to be protected from this investment needs and the raise of tariffs. So this is something that is a balance that needs to be made, and economic regulation can indeed be the linchpin of this balance. We are not replacing utilities, we are not controlling utilities, we are just making the bridge between all these stakeholders so that everything actually works. So I would point out 4 different topics. It's not, I will not explain everything, but I think that there are 4 different topics that we need to consider when we consider economic regulation and the role of economic regulation. So first of all, how can regulators promote efficiency? Well, performance-based regulation is something that is in our top priority list of economic regulation. So when we're speaking about performance targets, so it's not just about calculating tariffs, it's also about actually setting out targets for the utilities connected with leakage reduction, energy consumption, and for instance, service continuity. So this is something that regulators can and effectively do. And also we do that transparently, promoting benchmarking so that utilities know who is the best utility doing this particular point and how can we do as this utility does. So this is something that is very relevant in our work as economic regulators, also the benchmarking and the transparency where we actually provide data around how utilities are actually fulfilling these targets. Benchmarking and transparency are key for plans, for making good plans, and for being aware that the investment is actually being put in the right place. And so this is something that we are continuously focusing. And we have big utilities and small utilities. We have big projects and smaller projects. And economic regulation can also be helpful in actually having a different look, a higher look to big utilities and big projects, but also being available for smaller utilities so that they can develop smaller projects, but also with the same targets. And this is something that is the reality in countries like Portugal and also Italy. And so we need to be able to have these different looks into the projects and utilities. Regulation is also, coming to the second point, a catalyst for stable and transparent investment conditions, because predictable investment conditions are key for financing parties. And so economic regulation can indeed provide an answer to this, having stable rules, having transparency in the way we make decisions, in the way we calculate tariffs, in the way we put forward our methodologies for tariff calculations. And so this is also kind of a good environment for financing and for providing good financial conditions. Thirdly, regulatory agencies has also a relevant role in addressing water crises such as floods, but mostly scarcity and drought. There are regulatory instruments that are indeed used, and in Portugal this was a clear example last year. There are regulatory instruments connected with scarcity-aware tariff structures, pricing mechanisms, progressive tariffs that can be put in place when there is a scarcity topic and when there are droughts, so that consumers can decrease demand and actually tariff setting can be very, very helpful on this regard and on water crisis. And finally, I would say that aligning regulatory actions with the EU the EU current plan is key. This resilience topic is for us very, very much a priority, not only because of the context that we are facing, but of course because of water crisis and how it is felt by population and by communities in real life. We have felt it in the southern countries, in Portugal with drought. We have felt it with the floods, and regulatory instruments can indeed provide stable conditions so that the investment is done. Is effectively done, and it is helpful to reach targets, operational targets for this sector. It's not done because it's done because it has a purpose, and regulatory agencies can indeed provide this link between operational efficiency, between environmental sustainability and consumer protection, the consumers that are here today and the consumers that will be here tomorrow. So I think that this will be it.
Thanks a lot, Professor. Thanks a lot, Professor Herault, very clear and very concise. Thanks for keeping the time. Thanks also for reminding, we were a bit missing so far the attention to the consumer, to the user of water, that they should be the polar star, let's say, of our action in general. I move now to James Hunt from European Investment Bank. But James Hunt, before joining the APE, has gained extensive experience in the water sector by holding various roles from regulatory to policy. So, James Hunt, my president was saying that the APE plays a key role for various reasons. Would you agree, President? And Professor Herault just mentioned the importance of regulation to drive investment. Is that enough, or from your perspective as a bank, something more is needed, in particular maybe to cover those little investments that were mentioned before? James Hunt.
They're worried you're going to steal it.
No, it's they know I'm Portuguese.
Yes, okay, right. Morning, everybody. I do work for the European Investment Bank. It's a not-for-profit bank, and it's aimed at addressing market failures. Can I just remind everybody, we lend money, we don't print it. So when my colleagues say, the EIB will solve it, well, just hang on a minute, let's be clear. Oh, gosh, right. The Global Economic Commission, one of the key authors of which will speak in a moment, and the Commission, European Commission, talked about restoring the broken water cycle. Now, is that something we're asking water companies to do? They didn't break it. We know who did. Human beings broke it. It wasn't the intention, it wasn't vandalism. We wanted something from the land, agriculture, forestry, development. The water cycle was a victim, not an objective. That's what's happened. We've spent hundreds of years improving the speed at which water, once it hits the ground, goes to the sea. That's what we've done. We've degraded the land, we've drained the land, we've straightened rivers, we've canalized. That is what we have done to break the water cycle. If we want to repair that, we still want the dividends from the land, from the forests, in the urban areas. We need to rethink the way we manage water at a catchment scale. Sorry, I mean, much as I love Milo and the water industry, you're not empowered to do it. 2/3 of, or about, how much agricultural land is there in the UE? It's about 60%, yes? No, sorry, 40% is agricultural land, but agriculture uses 60% of the water. Now, much as I love the intervention from Claudia, we shouldn't be putting money into doing the wrong thing. European Court of Auditors in 2021 concluded that the current Common Agricultural Policy is a disincentive to water efficiency. Now, this isn't the first time we've had this conversation. The Commission in 2011 issued a communication on blueprint for water, and subsequently, we've been having this conversation. Why haven't we changed? Now, it's not the EIB's fault, I promise you. It's because there are some very, very difficult questions to be asked about how we re-engineer catchment management to deliver resilience to floods and droughts. Now, there are some fantastic projects being done, one of which is called Spongescapes. I know this all sounds very cartoonish, but it's the idea that water retention, holding water in the landscape, in the groundwater, even in artificial structures, come to that, is what we need to do to deal with the hugely changing variability in precipitation patterns. We need to hang on to the water to stop it causing a flood so that it's available when there isn't rain and we need it for drought. That's very complicated to do in real terms. So what we should have is a queue of people at the bank's door saying we want to do catchment restoration. We have one or two, but not very many. So, and bear in mind, the EIB does not go out and say, you will do this project. We are reactive. People come to us and say, we want to borrow money. We say, is it a good project? They say, yes, we check, off we go. Not complicated. We need to inspire people to make those changes. Now, large and small, I agree. The bank is able to support national promotional banks who then on-lend for small projects. So we're not just interested in the huge, great banner project with, lots of noughts at the end. We really want to engage in that. But there has to be a driver. Now, is that better? Is that more law? Do we need more law? No, we don't, actually. Thanks to European institutions, we have perfectly good water legislation in the European Union. But we could do with our member states taking it a bit more seriously. Now, I don't have that kind of leverage. I don't think you do either. Maybe the Commission does. And our neighbours, the European Investment Bank, for those of you who don't know, is based in Luxembourg, next to the European Court of Justice. Just a thought. I think I'm going to use less of my time so that I give more time to Xavier and for questions. You're buying lunch?
Thanks, James Hunt. Thanks a lot for your contribution. I think there are already some questions there for the Commission, but let's put a buffer, because last but not least, in our first round, we have already referred to many times Xavier Leflaive, Senior Advisor for the OECD. Xavier Leflaive coordinated the recommendation of the OECD Council on Water. He was also one of the major coordinator, author of the study mentioned by President on the water investment needs for the water sector in Europe. More recently, your team coordinated the work of the Global Commission on the Economics of Water that our title hints to in some way. So I think that some of the things that have been said echo the work that the OECD has been doing on this. So is there any point that you would like to highlight what has already been said, or there is something that is missing in the reflection so far? Thank you, Xavier.
Thank you, Milo, for the introduction. And I would like to congratulate MEP Bosse for hosting that meeting, which I think is very, very opportune and relevant. I'll use some of the time that was saved by James to respond to a point that was made earlier. No, very quickly, obviously the report that we released in 2020 factored climate change in. That was a joint effort by the European Commission, DG Environment and the OECD. And of course, in 2020, we were aware of climate change, and we were aware that it would affect investment needs for water. So that driver was reflected in the report. Now, I won't go into the methodological issues, but as James just very eloquently alluded to, how do you deal with climate change from a water cycle perspective? You can either, and I oversimplify, but you could either build very costly reservoirs that may not be very resilient, but you're pretty sure you'll spend a lot of money. Or you can try to restore catchment areas. You can try to keep moisture in soils. That's a massive contributor to resilience, and you do that by conserving wetlands, forests, by transitioning agriculture towards regenerative agriculture that will keep moisture in soils. And of course, the investment needs will be very different. So climate change was factored in. Now, how that drives or how resilience actually drives investment needs will depend on the strategies that are promoted by the European Commission and implemented by the member states. So this is why, this is how climate change was approached in the report. Now, that said, I would like to reflect on a couple of things we heard this morning. First, reliance on the EIB and beyond the EIB on private sources of finance. Of course, the EIB is doing an amazing work, but as James said, they are not printing money, and the money they are lending will have to be paid back. And the OECD insists that there are only 3 sources of funding that don't need to be repaid: tariff, taxes, and transfer from the international community. You don't decide to bring in private funding. Private money will only accrue to the water sector if there is a robust combination of the 3 T's to repay the loans or to pay back the investor that have contributed in equity. So there is no, private money doesn't naturally flow, and you don't decide to bring it in. You create the conditions to attract it, and a very important element of these enabling conditions is a robust combination of 3 T's: so tariffs, taxes, and transfers. I would like to echo a very important point made by Claudia in her keynote, is that closing the gap is not merely about more money. It is also about making a much better use of what is already available. And I'm thinking of 3 types of assets. First, the infrastructure we have. We still see in the water sector this very vicious cycle of infrastructure being built but not properly operated and maintained, so it decays and it has to be built again at a very high cost sooner than expected. So closing the financing gap has to do with putting more money into operation and maintenance of existing infrastructure. This is actually, the elephant in the room. We very easily focus and jump on investment, building new infrastructure. But are we paying enough attention to properly operating and maintaining the existing assets? This is a rhetorical question, because obviously we are not. Second resource that we could make a better use of is water. Through water demand management, you can actually save huge costs of increasing water supply. The point that was made by Donaldi on water use efficiency is critical. If we improve water use efficiency, we will minimize future financing needs for water supply augmentation. And of course, a third resource that we could make a much better use of is finance. As Claudia said, there is already a lot of money going to the water sector, but there is also a massive amounts of finance which are going which is working against our ambition in the water sector. So I would like to elaborate on this point a little bit more. First, technological choices. One thing that I've been active in that field for 15 years at the OECD, the benefit of aging. You gain. You can follow trends and track progress. One thing that struck me over these 15 years is that money flows to a number of projects which may be profitable, but may not generate benefit on the ground. We keep financing infrastructure because there is a robust financing model. Typically, it's easy to finance desalination. It's much more complex to finance water resilience or water demand in an urban environment. It's not because desalination is more productive or more effective or more resilient. Actually, it's not. It's the opposite. Money will flow to desalination plants because there is a robust financing model. It's actually quite straightforward. You know, a municipality will commit to buy X amount of water at a certain price for the next 20 years. Anyone can finance that. You don't need the EIB because you have a stable revenue flow. The risk is under control. You know, every financer, it's a dream project for a financer. Now, fixing leaks, fixing, you know, flood risks in an urban environment, driving water demand management down. These are much more resilient responses, but much more difficult to finance because, as Claudia said, this can be small scale. The transaction costs can be very significant, and this is exactly what financiers don't like. So one thing that strikes me in the water sector is that a lot of money is going to projects, not because they are beneficial, but because they are bankable. And this narrative I've been hearing for 15 years that we need more bankable projects, I'm not sure it's really pushing in the right direction. I wish we had more beneficial projects, and we can then make these beneficial projects bankable. I know this is not the usual mantra, and I may not make new friends in that audience, but I will really encourage our colleagues from the Commission and EIB and other partners with whom we work so closely, and the regulators, of course, who have a critical role to play in that field, to make sure that money goes to beneficial projects and how to make these beneficial projects bankable. Another point, so related to that, as Claudia said, there are massive volume of finance which are going to the wrong direction. Claudia may have been may have been an understatement. I can be more blunt because I'm not directly in charge. But typically, when you talk about environmental harmful subsidies, this is typically an area where the OECD and the European Commission could join forces. There are massive agriculture subsidies that work against our nature, biodiversity, climate, and water agendas. The OECD estimate that there are roughly 600 billion euros going into agriculture subsidies that work against the environmental agenda. There is a lot we could achieve by redirecting part of that, volume of finance to try to align it with the ambition of a water resilience strategy and other key features of the water agenda in Europe. The corporate sector is actually moving to a very interesting direction, and the OECD is doing new work on this. All the work on disclosure, making sure, as Claudia said, that corporates know how much they are exposed and vulnerable to water risks is a game changer potentially, because when all these corporates realize how exposed and vulnerable they are, that may actually change the way they allocate, their investment. That may change the direction of the portfolios, and that will certainly change investment or portfolio decisions by banks, financiers who actually don't care about water, but they want to deliver on their own mandate, which is financing projects that will be profitable. And if you think about it, there is no one industry in Europe that is water safe. So all the banks, all the financiers that may not factor in water are actually exposed and vulnerable to water risks through their portfolio. So there is a massive role that could be done here, working with regulators, not the economic regulators that in the water sector. So in addition to our reg, but working with the financial regulators, the central banks, and the ECB, the European Central Bank, is one of the very few central banks globally which has this item on their agenda, and they get it. They're starting to take action here. And this is really, again, a game changer, because if the financial regulators urge corporates to take action to minimize their exposure and vulnerability to water risks, that can really redirect massive flows of finance, which today work against our water ambition, and realign them with the water agenda. Not an easy conversation. I don't think we have the metrics today. I don't think we have the data. But there is very interesting work going on by colleagues from CDP and others, and the OECD is involved in some of these projects. And this is really an area where Europe also can show leadership globally, being aware of these risks and taking action that can really help redirect financing flows and align them with the water agenda. The point here is that water resilience is not merely in the hands of the water community. Of course, we as water stakeholders, water experts or actors, we can play a role. But a lot of the capacity to make our economies, societies, and ecosystems resilient to water risk is in the hands of people who don't have water on the agenda. So a big part of our role is to put water resilience on the agenda of all these industries that actually would benefit from better resilience. The very last point, there is one word in the title of the seminar which hasn't been really discussed. It's equity. I will rephrase that as justice, social justice. Everything we discussed here has a very strong justice component. So I hope that maybe with the questions we have more time to address that. Water resilience is, the way I see it, essentially an equity issue, because who is most affected, vulnerable and exposed to water risks, this is not the better off communities. These are not the better, the more wealthiest part of our citizens and communities. So water resilience is essentially a social justice issue. And my experience is that delivering on water resilience has to be just. Otherwise, it won't work. But I'm sure this is, we don't know, we are not involved, and the suspense goes on. But I'm pretty sure this will be a strong element of the water resilience strategy. Anyway, that's the direction the OECD would like to encourage. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. We are also fully convinced that this is a key element of the water resilience strategy that will be there. We are persuaded. Thanks a lot. A lot of food for thought. I also take note of what you said, that every type of finance needs to be paid back. And ultimately, you have three ways of doing that. It is tariff, taxes, or transfer. Something that I might need also to use this quote. So in some discussion I had sometimes very high level here in Brussels, because this sometimes is missed, the fact that finance needs to be paid back. Thanks for the panelists, because we catch up a bit of the delay. We have still time for a round of reaction from panelists before opening the floor for questions from the audience, and before leaving at the end the floor to MEP Stine Bosse for closing remarks. First, I address to Ms. Claudia Lazabal if she has a reaction to some of the things that have been said.
What strikes me, but it's not really strikes me, it actually reassures me that the different interventions are quite complementary. We also want to do some damage expectations. This water resilience strategy, we hopefully will have a huge impact, but will not in itself solve the whole water crisis. I am dumping your enthusiasm, I know, but it basically is setting the mechanisms, the concepts, the priorities for many others at very different levels, and given the subsidiarity aspects of water, to pick up and do their part of the job. So in that sense, I think the panel that we have here, which covers basically many of the actors that are going to be empowered and are going to be called on to act very urgently in their remits to change things. I think it's very promising that we have among the different actors a common vision of what should be the way forward.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Olazabal. I start this quick round of reaction from panelists. Please be short. Also, and I'm happy, very honored that MEP Bahada join us, the rapporteur of the Water Resilience Initiative. So we'll also give him in a second the possibility to say some remarks. We start from this side, this way. No, you. Oh, okay. So also because indeed, what time is it? Let's build the reactions through question and answer from the audience. Maybe first, then if MEP Bahada can say a word about the report that was voted yesterday in the MEP committee before we open the floor for question and answer. Thank you a lot for joining us.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you to Aqua Public Europea for organizing this event. I mean, you organized it at a very good date, the day after we have approved our initiative. And I would like to say hi and good morning to everyone. So I'm basically, as introduced Thomas Bayad, I'm a newly elected member, which was entrusted with a very important job for the Parliament. And I am very looking forward to see the end result of our initiative and what the Commission will actually be presenting to us. Because when we started this initiative, I had a choice. Or we do an initiative which is reactionary, we see what the Commission comes out with, and then we just react, or we do something proactively. And I come from a thought that we should always try to be proactive, and politicians should try to be proactive. And I bring the voice also of many people across regions. I come from a very small island in Malta. And I come from a perspective where people want us, politicians, to be proactive and to come with solutions and to come with something which is tangible, not just words. And that is what we're trying to do with this initiative. And of course, there might be thoughts also that this was watered down from my original draft. But I also think that my draft, because I had only a word limit and a page limit, now the initiative is even wider and it's touching upon different aspects more than my draft report. And yesterday we have a basis to go to the plenary in the beginning of May in order to provide the Commission the voice of this House on how the strategy that they will be presenting in June should look like. And I think like this initiative has more value and has more has space in this debate rather than if it was something that is reactionary. And yesterday, MEPs in the Environment Committee, in a very good majority, have sent a clear message that we require in the upcoming MFF a dedicated and separate funding line to deal with the water crisis. This was a clear message. This was a message also expressed by Aqua Publica, who are actually the first stakeholder that I have spoken to with respect to this report. And we need this funding for several reasons, but I, as a politician, I'm trying to think what is the most important. And here I mention the modernization of infrastructure, of what we have right now, but also innovation to look beyond the status quo. So not only fixing what is not working right now, but filling the gaps and looking beyond and seeing what technology is giving us new. But also looking at nature-based solutions in a way that we can also look at the whole water cycle, not just looking at parts of it, but fixing the whole cycle altogether. And sticking to financing, that's why I'm also happy that the European Investment Bank is here today. And the importance that the European Investment Bank continues and actually strengthens its role in investment in water resilience. And we need to support innovation towards a resilient water infrastructure, projects leading, for example, to flood risk management, erosion prevention, revitalization of water sources, and also looking at new technologies and upcoming technologies. We need to look at non-conventional water sources. We need to look at water reuse. And I come from a country that, after decades of facing water scarcity, today, this month, we have called on people to say, listen, forget water bottles. We're telling you drink from the tap. Because we have invested so much in other sources of water. We have invested a lot on desalination in our country that is 100% based on renewable energy, that we totally now are confident that we can circumvent the situation that we have, and we can become totally independent and risk-free. That we are telling people, okay, we have water, you can drink it. Before, we tried to make water not attractive because we did not have enough water. Now we want people to drink it. So we need to learn from what we have been doing. I'm not saying learn from Malta only, but we need to see what worked out, and we need to export our knowledge to regions which are now facing the new realities that we, Mediterraneans, have been facing for so long. But to do that, we need knowledge sharing, we need financing that unlocks new technologies, and also we need technologies that help us gather data. And I, as a scientist, I'm a bit biased, because I totally believe that we need data that is real time, and that is also the same across countries, so that we have comparable data that can help us base our decisions on. We need to stop basing decisions on what I deem is fit, but rather base decisions on facts and numbers. And that's why we need technologies. That's why we need help of new and upcoming technologies to see how much water we use, how much water we have, how polluted our water is, and what is the culprit, and also address leakages and see which infrastructure needs to be upgraded. And that is what I try to achieve with this draft report. And I hope that this draft report will be finalized in plenary in the on the 6th of May, so that the Commission can actually take up what we're doing. We're trying to give you the work ready so that you can just take what we're saying. But I think we have something that is very balanced, something that is very factual, and something that can bring results. And to that, I go back to say what I started from: we need money to do this.
Many thanks. Many thanks, MEP Bajada, for being here and for your commitment, indeed, on the water resilience work, and your colleagues as well. As a stakeholder, I can just say that indeed there has been a high level of sensitivity of MEPs towards the issues of the water sector, and I think that political attention will strengthen also the work of the European Commission and the challenge that you have also with other colleagues from other directorates. I really want to now open a bit the floor for some question and answers, because we have been criticized in the past not to doing so. But before, my duty also as a moderator is asking the panelists if there is some immediate reactions to what your colleagues have said. I know that Professor Aero will react. Please, quick, so we can leave.
Very, very quick, just to follow up on what has been said, and picking up on the data topic. Of course, we are only our association as economic regulators. We are thinking about urban use of water, so it's just a little bit less than 20% of the water use. So we need to face the 100%, and data collection is something that is very, very key for us as economic regulators, so that we have the same KPIs This is only covering urban use of water, but efficiency measurement and the way that we measure how investments is made needs to be based on safe and clear data. And this is something that the regulators need to improve and need to do, and is one of the top priorities. And also around equity and justice, we think about this from a consumer perspective. And also when we think about transparent and sustainable cost recovery through tariffs and the polluter pays principle, this is key. But this only works also if we think about social tariffs and we think about having public assistance only for those who really need it. And so when we think that tariffs are not recovering costs, and that these costs are being recovered by the public budgets, this is really unfair. Because public budgets are actually paying for everybody, independently of whether they need it or not. So we need to be very precise on the cost recovery principle, on the polluter pays principle, and how we calculate tariffs. But at the same time, we need to have very strong social policies also, so that this puzzle actually meets the equity topic that was just mentioned. And finally, one additional topic around investment needs. We think that efficiency should drive investment needs. So reduction of demand through control of leakages and the investment that needs to be made in controlling demand for water. This is something that should be prioritized. And so regulators, economic regulators, need to be able, and we are working for that, need to be able to do the maths first and calculate tariffs, but at the same time be sure that the investments that are made are really made, and they are not only bankable but are actually beneficent. And sometimes this is in the frontier for environmental regulation, but this needs to be included in the economic regulation, because this is something that economic regulation only works if we are very sure that the tariffs are paying investments that are needed and that provide results. And so this is measured through data, but we need results. That's it.
Thank you a lot, Professor Earl, for these points. And I can just say that on equity, Aqua Publica is fully aligned with WAREG, and so we're happy to work on this together, and also confirm on the importance of data from a water operator's point of view. When we need to do a long-term water quantity plan to get ready for the future, we know about water consumption from users, but we don't know how much water is around for other uses, because we don't have this kind of data. And without that, we cannot do a proper long-term water quantity plan. On beneficial bankable projects, maybe there will be some questions, because I'm happy to hear also the thought of the bank on the swap from bankable to beneficial project. Before opening the floor, some other immediate reactions from please, Bernard.
Yes, small reaction. First, thanks to Thomas Pachata for this wonderful initiative, and to have stressed the role of Aqua Publica Europea. I was very, very happy to hear James Hunt from the EIB about the water retention and the nature-based solutions. And I would like to further stress the critical role of the European Investment Bank for water operators. Not only does the EIB provide the long-term low-interest loans that we have to pay back, of course, but receiving a grant from the EIB is also a proof of financial stability, and this makes operators also bankable for the private sector. This is very important. And I would like to express a second concern. It's about seeing the cost of water supply and treatment spiraling out of control because of increasing pollution, and our improved capacities to monitor this pollution. To prevent further cost increases, we must take bold measures to reduce pollution at source. A concrete example would be to ban pesticide use in and around water catchment areas, and the CAP's budget could be used to support the farmers in this transitioning trajectory to a more sustainable agricultural practices, as you told us, Xavier, in the direction of a regenerative agriculture.
Thanks a lot, Bernard van Nuffel. If there are other panelists that want to react, I ask you to wait to do so through the questions from the audience, because I really want to open the floor at least for a couple of questions from the audience before handing over to MEP Stine Bosse. Please, I see 3. One from our member, one from pharmaceutical industry, and then I will take the 3 questions. Please introduce yourself. The gentleman over there that I know is from our member.
Hi everyone, thank you for convening this meeting. I'm Benjamin Gestin, I'm CEO of Eau de Paris, the city of Paris drinking water utility. Well, we all agree, I think, that restoring water cycle, as James put and Xavier reinforced, is probably the key priority if we want to make our water system resilient. Some of us will agree that technological solutions are not the main answer to that challenge. If we ask ourselves the question, who's in charge of restoring the water cycle, probably most of us would reply, everyone. But in public policies, everyone usually equals to no one at all, equals to dissolution of responsibilities. I come back to one of the numbers James used in his very inspiring presentation. How much of land in the European Union is used for agriculture? 40%. I just want to reverse the number. How much of the catchment areas are used for agriculture? In the Paris water system, it's probably 90%, 95%. So the key people who should be in charge of restoring the water cycle, preserving the water resources, are farmers. So I go back to what Xavier said that...
Please keep your question or statement short. Thanks.
You'll see the end of my question right now. I go back to what Xavier said about non-beneficial use of European money. How do we make sure that the common agricultural policy money goes to water resilience and protection of water resources? That's 53 billion euros every year.
Thank you, Benjamin. Another question from the gentleman that I know from different contexts. Please introduce yourself.
All right. Thanks, Milo, and thanks everyone, and thank you for the invitation, and thanks for the very interesting panel discussion. My name is Philipp Lazan. I'm representing the Fresenius Group. We're a global healthcare company. Part of our portfolio is the production of pharmaceuticals, especially generic pharmaceuticals, generic medicines. And here we're facing really significant problems, and I would, that's rather a call to action for everyone, because what became clear today for me as well is that there's a huge financial need, a huge investment need. And I have to, unfortunately, partially disagree with Mr. Hunt, because I don't think that we have a perfectly designed legislation in water for the moment. And maybe it will be up to the EU court to decide on that. But the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, as it is designed now, will really bring huge problems for all of us. Why I'm saying that is because everyone knows amoxicillin is a antibiotic used in many cases when you have a severe infection. A lot of people in the EU have diabetes. Metformin is the basic treatment for that. Those products, the costs will rise between 500 to 900%. That means we would need to increase prices by 500 to 900%. For generics, that's a huge problem. The daily therapy costs for generics are a few cents to a few euros. This is impossible. So those medicaments, they will disappear from the European market because it's impossible to place them on the market under the current framework. And therefore, we really have to, yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm extending my time. We really have to find a common solution for that, because also me and us, also me as a person, we all want to have clean water, but at the same time, we also need to create a system which is allowing placing those critical medicines on the market.
Thank you, Philip. Another question from another member. I'm a bit partial, but I saw then the gentleman over there at the end.
Yeah, no, only three things to...
Can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Francesco Mascolo from MEM Milan, member of Aqua Public Europea. Three underlines for you. One, public procurement rules. We need simplification. As a public operator, we are aware of spending public funding, but we need that rules are really, really simplified to be competitive with the private sector and to be able to implement the plan of investment that we have. Second, please don't take the energy sector as the benchmark for the beneficial to the consumer in the net, because we are aware that all the investment done have produced plenty of earnings to the companies and only a little bit benefit for consumers. Finally, the importance of funding current expenses for institutions and companies in order to have money for feasibility project that could be translated into structural plan for investment and then funded with CapEx. We need also a little higher current expenses to be prepared to call for funding big investment or little investment. Finally, a mechanism for the regulator, a mechanism for the investment that are not consistent with the tariff currently algorithm. I mean, all the project for resilience, lamination basin or nature-based solution need to have a structured algorithm that, if it's not in the tariff, is in another structured way of funding our projects.
Thank you to Vice President Mascolo. Last question from gentleman over there. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning. Francisco d'Aragão from the water regulator of Bruxelles in Brussels. Two short questions. First question, I'm hearing that there's a desire to swipe away subsidies and as well that usually things have to be paid back. But at the same time, I'm hearing that there's going to be a huge EU fund in next MFF. So my question is, does this fund will have to be paid back by the water operators? And second question is a bit addressing the elephant in the room, which is usually the big ties between the water sector and politics and the unwillingness to increase tariffs. And one of the reasons we see is that investments are not being made even if the financing exists, because that would be having as a consequence an increase in tariffs. And to such extent that I agree with what President Eiro said, that water regulators have a role to play in that case. And if in the new, my question is, if in the new EU law, there will be some kind of protection or some kind of missions that are addressed to the water regulators that already exist in Europe, or if there's going to be as well maybe a creation of a water regulator in every country in Europe, so that we can see properly what is the amount of money that needs to be invested and that we can address correctly the problem of underinvestment. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running light. So I look first at the panelists that have not reacted yet, to James and Xavier and Bonaldi. If you want to pick up or say more or something on the question that have been raised. We have four that have been raised. The role of CAP, how to address towards in a useful way for protection of catchment area. The role of pharmaceutical and trade-off between quality, different health dimension of water-related policy. And then public procurement, three points, including how to the scalability of the project and the role of regulator. Does anyone want to react to some of this question or to some of the things that speakers have said before?
Can I just?
Yeah.
Just to reiterate, there was mention earlier of bankable projects. Just to stress, the role of the EIB is not to compete with private sector finance. If a project is financially beneficial, take a loan from a private bank. The EIB is there to deal with what is called market failures. These are instances where public beneficial goods are not recognized within the financial system, but they are desirable. At which point, a bank like EIB, and there are others I know, I've forgotten their names for the moment, can step in. Concerning the pharmaceuticals, you make a very valid point, but that could be a very long conversation. And so I'm not trying to denigrate the point, but I am recognizing that we're against the clock. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
I suppose on the question of tariffs, I might just chime in quickly with some of our view. I think, again, just kind of going back to an Irish kind of context, I think, and this could probably be extrapolated and then used more broadly, but I think there's certainly from a political perspective, a sort of a sensitization job to be done. You know, I was somewhat old enough to remember where the discussion of bringing back residential tariffs was almost enough to topple a government. I've never seen the sorts in terms of a reaction to the idea. So I think politically there's a job to be done. And then I suppose from the Commission, perhaps, you know, a job that can continue to be exercised is a continued exchange of best practices across the EU to showcase that this can be done. But then also, you know, I think we really need enforcement ultimately, and I suppose it's maybe a challenging time to get hard-handed and fisted about it. But you know, Article 9 in that Water Framework Directive is key, and if we continue in the mold that we're in now, then, you know, we're sleepwalking into a crisis. So I suppose that's what I can contribute to that point on tariffs.
Thanks, Bonaldi. Xavier?
Thanks. Two quick points. Just to reiterate that the water resilience, as we said earlier, water resilience is not merely in the hands of the water community. So there is a role for farmers. There is a role for the pharmaceutical industry. And we're not here working as, you know, enemies. The point is to work together. So how do we engage constructively with the farming community? How do we engage constructively with the pharmaceutical industry? Because they are part of the solution. The point I would like to really emphasize is that it would be unfair and probably ineffective if the water bill had to foot all these costs. So how do we engage with the other communities who are you know, who are involved in these and whose action can actually contribute to minimizing the cost or covering part of the cost?
1 minute because the MEP has to leave and
I can stop.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very, very interesting, wasn't really a discussion, but a lot of viewpoints that I thought were very, very interesting. And sorry, Thomas, that you didn't get all of the points here, because they were actually very, very strong for us to work further with these things. I want to start from the back here. And it was as if some of the points from both OECD and from the EIB actually echoed my campaign, because in my campaign I was all over the place regarding let's just implement the Water Framework Directive. I mean, this is not new legislation. This is 20-year-old legislation. Let's get going on this one. So that is actually fixing the basics, and I think you both touched upon that. Now, is that easy with the parliament that we have right now? Not really. So to be quite honest, there will be a very big need for people to push further on this agenda. but obviously that is the way to go. Then I want also to say that I have from experience with working together with EIB in Greenland, actually, on water projects up there, first-hand experience of the excellent people that work with EIB. And the idea with EIB, and you named it so clearly, but it also is a blueprint. So when you, after working with EIB, go out to the private sector to finance, it is actually an excellent blueprint. So I'm sure you're aware of that in your work. Then we also heard from the regulators, and I think your point that you came back to with data is an obvious one. And here we, of course, have with both the AI methods that we can use now, but with the whole digitalization that we can actually grip and have at hand is a very obvious one. But I also very much focused on your words about balancing, not necessarily controlling everything in every detail, and making sure that we really know that what we're doing here is for the benefit of citizens. And we should never forget that. And then, of course, back to business. I used to be a board member at Grundfos many years back during my business career. So I really adapted into everything was said. And this is, of course, good business. And actually making sure that there is a connection here, knowing that there is business to be done. I really also thought that was very interesting to listen to the Commission's points here, which I find very intriguing, that some of the points listening into today's comments and yesterday's comments from the pharmaceutical sector, also where there are areas where there's just not enough connection. Here, I think perhaps even EIB can play a very active role in making things happen. And then, of course, also the operator's point of view, very, very obvious, feet on the ground, know what's going on. Very important information for all of us to grab. And then finally, I find it very intriguing, and you said it very clearly, Claudia, the money is there. And I take that as a truth. And then, of course, it is connecting the dots, which becomes very interesting. And I trust that that will be high on your agenda. To make sure that we actually can connect the dots and that all the good solutions and innovative ideas can really help us forward on this very important topic. In my home country, just to finalize, in Denmark, half of the wells are taken out today because of pesticides. What? We cannot give this to our children. We have to fix it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending.